I always knew I was adopted. It was a simple, clean fact of my life. But I never knew about the box of letters hidden in my old closet. Each one a desperate message from a woman who never stopped thinking about me. Letters my adoptive mother had kept from me for my entire life. My name is Emma. The relationship with my mom, Susan, had been strained for years. We were just different people. Where I was messy and emotional, she was orderly and reserved. Our weekly phone calls were a masterclass in polite, surface-level chatter. How's work? Fine. The weather's been nice. Yeah. I was back in my childhood home for the first time in a year, a long weekend visit to see Dad. Mom and I were already doing that delicate dance of avoiding any topic that could lead to a disagreement. To escape the tension, I decided to tackle my old bedroom closet, a time capsule of my teenage years. Mom had been asking me for years to clear it out. It was filled with high school textbooks, old band t-shirts, and a faint smell of dust and nostalgia. As I pulled a box of old notebooks from the top shelf, my fingers brushed against something taped to the very back of the shelf. It was a shoebox, secured with brittle, yellowing packing tape. It wasn't labeled, a weird place to store shoes. Curiosity got the better of me. I carefully peeled the tape away, the sound echoing in the quiet room. I lifted the lid. There were no shoes inside. The box was filled to the brim with envelopes, dozens of them. They were all addressed to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, in a delicate, feminine handwriting I didn't recognize. The return address in the top left corner was always the same, but it was the name that made my blood run cold. Isabella Rossi.
My birth mother's name. The name my parents had only ever mentioned once or twice, always with a vague, "It was a closed adoption, honey. It was for the best." My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope on top. It was dated March 15th, my birthday, just a year after I was born. I slid the letter out. The paper was thin, the ink a faded blue. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Davis," it began. "I hope this letter finds you well. I think of you all every day. I wonder, is she walking yet? What is her first word? Does she have your eyes, Mrs. Davis? I pray she is happy and healthy. Please, if you can, just a small photo. I hope she will love books as I do. I hope one day she will understand and maybe even forgive me without ever knowing what for." I sat on the floor of my old room, surrounded by my childhood, and wept. For the first time in my life, Isabella Rossi wasn't a name on a form. She was a real person, with a voice, with hopes, with a pain so deep it seeped through the paper and into my hands. And my parents, the people I thought were always painfully honest, had hidden her from me. They had hidden me from myself. I looked at the stack of letters. There were so many. This was just the first one. The floodgates were open. I couldn't stop. I sat there on the dusty floor, the afternoon light fading outside my window, and I read letter after letter. Each one was a timestamp of a life I could have had, a ghost of a mother who was desperately trying to hold onto a thread connecting her to me. They came every year, like clockwork, around my birthday, age 2. I hope she's a curious toddler. I imagine her getting into everything. Does she like animals? I always loved dogs. Age 5. Is she starting kindergarten? I hope the other children are kind to her. I packed a little locket with this letter, just in case you'd let her have it. My fingers fumbled in the box, finding a tiny, tarnished silver heart. I'd never seen it before. Age 10. Double digits. A milestone. I got married last year. His name is Michael. He's kind. He knows about her. We have a son now. His name is Luca. I tell him about his big sister out there in the world. I had a brother. The word echoed in my mind. Luca, a brother I never knew existed. The clean, simple story of my adoption, a young woman who couldn't care for a child and made a clean break, was shattering into a million pieces. This wasn't a clean break. This was a slow, painful tearing. She had built a new life, but she had never, ever forgotten me. And with every letter, a new, chilling realization dawned on me. My parents, the people who raised me, had read these. They had held
this locket. They knew about my brother Luca. They knew about her marriage. They knew she thought of me every single day. And they had chosen, consciously and repeatedly, to keep it all from me. The trust I had in them, the foundation of my entire life, was cracking apart with every word I read. I reached the letters from my teenage years. The tone began to change. The hopeful questions slowly turned into quiet pleas, and then into a resigned sadness. The last letter was dated the year I turned 18. I understand now, Isabella wrote, her handwriting a little less steady. 18 years. She is an adult. If she wanted to find me, she would have. I have to accept that you've raised her to be happy and complete, with no need for me in her story. This will be my last letter. Please just tell her I loved her. I always will. This was it. The final letter, written with a heartbreaking finality. She had given up on me because my parents had let her believe I didn't care. The silence in the house felt different now. It wasn't just tension, it was complicity. I looked at the closed door of my room. My mom was on the other side of it, in the kitchen, probably starting dinner. The woman who had hidden this entire part of me. I had to confront her. But what would I even say? The sound of my mom chopping vegetables in the kitchen was a steady, normal rhythm that felt completely alien to me. I stood up, my legs stiff and numb, the final letter clutched in my hand. The box of lies sat at my feet. I walked out of my room and into the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my weight. I stopped in the doorway of the kitchen. Mom had her back to me, humming softly. The scene was so domestic, so peaceful. It was a lie. Mom, she turned, a warm smile on her face that instantly faltered when she saw my expression. Her eyes dropped to the letter in my hand, and the color drained from her face. The knife clattered onto the cutting board. Emma, I can explain, she whispered, her voice thin and strained. Explain what? I said, my own voice trembling with a fury I didn't know I was capable of. Explain why you have a box of letters from Isabella Rossi? Explain why you let her think I didn't want anything to do with her? Explain why you never told me I have a brother? Each question was a hammer blow. She flinched, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. It was a closed adoption, Emma. It was supposed to be— Don't. I cut her off, stepping forward. Don't you dare hide behind that. She wrote to you. For 18 years, you knew she loved me. You knew she was thinking about me, and you hid it. I thrust the last letter toward her. You let her think I didn't care. How could you do that? Tears were streaming down her face now. I was scared. The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. I was so scared you would choose her, that you would love her more, that everything I did, everything we built would just disappear. You were my daughter. I couldn't lose you. There it was. The truth, finally. It wasn't malice. It was fear, a deep, consuming fear that had led her to build a wall between me and my past. But understanding her reason didn't erase the betrayal. It just made it more tragic. I looked at this woman who had raised me, who had bandaged my knees and helped me with my homework, and I saw a stranger, capable of a profound, decades-long deception. The foundation of our relationship was gone. I need to find her, I said, my voice quiet but firm. My mom's eyes widened in pure panic. Emma, no, please, don't do this. But the decision was already made. The box hadn't just held letters. It had held my identity, and I was taking it back. The drive back to my apartment the next morning was silent and heavy. I had packed the box of letters in my trunk, its weight of physical presence I could feel with every turn. My mom had looked utterly shattered on the doorstep, but the wall between us was now solid, built from every letter she had kept hidden. Back in my own space, the reality of what I was about to do crashed down on me. I had a name, Isabella Rossi. I had an old address from the early letters, but people move. A closed adoption meant records were sealed. This was a long shot. I started with the obvious. I typed her name into a search engine. Thousands of results. I refined it, adding the old city name from the return address. Nothing concrete. I tried social media, scrolling through profiles of women with that name, my heart leaping at every face that looked vaguely like mine, only to be disappointed. Frustration mounted. This woman had poured her heart out for 18 years, and now I couldn't even find a trace of her? Was I too late? Had she truly given up and vanished? Then I remembered the last piece of information I had. Her husband's name, Michael, and her son's name, Luca, my brother. I took a deep breath and typed Isabella Rossi, Michael Luca into the search bar. The first result was an obituary. My blood ran cold. I clicked on it with a trembling hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't for Isabella. It was for Michael Rossi, dated 5 years ago. Beloved husband of Isabella, devoted father to Luca and his wife, Anna. The air left my lungs in a whoosh.
Relief and a new sharp sorrow warred inside me. Michael was gone, but Isabella was alive. And Luca was married. I had a sister-in-law named Anna. The obituary was a gold mine of information. It named the funeral home, which was in a town just 3 hours away from me. It was a real, tangible place. These weren't just names on paper anymore. They were people with lives in a town I could drive to. But now what? Do I just show up? Do I call? What would I even say? Hi, you don't know me, but I'm the daughter you gave up for adoption, and I just found out you spent my whole life writing me letters that were hidden from me. I stared at the phone number for the funeral home listed on the webpage. Maybe they could forward a message. It was a long shot, but it was the only thread I had to pull. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the dial button. This single call could change everything. My hand was shaking so badly, I had to put the phone down on the coffee table and put it on speaker. The ringtone echoed in my silent apartment, each tone stretching into an eternity. A woman with a kind, professional voice answered, "Green Meadows Funeral Home? How may I help you?" My throat was tight. "Hi, this is going to sound very strange," I began, my voice unsteady. "I'm trying to get in touch with the family of Michael Rossi. I found his obituary online." There was a cautious pause on the other end. "I'm sorry, we can't give out any personal information regarding clients." "I understand completely," I said quickly. "I'm not asking for that. My name is Emma Davis. I was adopted. I have reason to believe that Isabella Rossi is my biological mother. I was hoping you could possibly forward a letter to her or give her my contact information if she's willing." The silence on the other end was profound. I could almost hear the woman's internal debate. "That is highly unusual," she said slowly. "We have very strict privacy policies." My heart sank. This was it, the dead end. "But," she continued, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone, "I remember Mrs. Rossi. She's a lovely woman. I can't make any promises, but if you'd like to give me your name and number, I can see if she's listed in our directory and give her a call. It will be entirely up to her if she wishes to respond." It was more than I could have hoped for. I rattled off my information, my voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much." I spent the next 48 hours in a state of suspended animation. Every time my phone rang, my heart leapt into my throat. It was never her. Doubt began to creep in. What if she didn't want to be found? What if, after all these years, my sudden appearance was an unwelcome disruption to the life she had built without me? And then, on the third day, it happened. My phone lit up with an unknown number. The area code was the same as the funeral home. I took a deep, shuddering breath and swiped to answer. "Hello?" My voice was a whisper. There was a beat of silence, then a soft, melodic voice I had never heard, yet felt I'd known my whole life, spoke. "Emma, this is Isabella Rossi." The world stopped. I couldn't speak. All I could do was listen to the sound of my mother's voice for the very first time. "Hi," I finally managed, my voice cracking under the weight of the moment. I got your letters." A soft, shaky breath came through the phone. "You did?" she whispered, the hope in her voice so fragile it threatened to break me. "All these years, I thought—" "I never got them," I said, the words tumbling out. "I just found them in my parents' house. They were hidden in my old closet." The silence on the other end was different now, filled with the dawning understanding of a decades-long betrayal. "Oh, Emma," she breathed, and in those 2 words I heard a lifetime of pain and validation. I wrote every year. "I just needed you to know you were always in my heart. We need to meet," I said, the decision crystal clear. "Can we meet?" "Yes," she said without a moment's hesitation. "Anywhere, anytime." We agreed on a quiet coffee shop in her town, a neutral ground. The 3-hour drive felt both endless and instantaneous. My hands were glued to the steering wheel, my mind racing. What would she look like? Would we have the same eyes, the same smile? I saw her the moment I walked in. She was sitting in a booth by the window, nervously twisting a napkin in her hands. She looked up and our eyes met. It was like looking into a mirror of my future self. We had the same dark, wavy hair, the same shape to our faces. She stood up slowly, her hand coming to her mouth, her eyes glistening with tears. "Emma," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Hi, Mom," I whispered. We fell into each other's arms, holding on tightly as if making up for a lifetime of lost embraces. We spent the next 2 hours talking, crying, and laughing. She
showed me pictures of Luca, my brother, a handsome man with her smile. She told me about her life, about Michael, about how she never stopped wondering about me. It was healing. It was everything I had ever unknowingly longed for. But as I drove home, a new, more complicated feeling settled in. I had found one mother, but in the process, I had shattered my relationship with the other. The box of letters hadn't just given me a past, it had forced me into an impossible choice about my future. I pulled into my parking spot and just sat there, the engine off. I had two mothers, one who gave me life and never let me go in her heart, and one who raised me but held my history hostage out of fear. I looked at my phone. I had a dozen missed calls from my dad and a single heartbreaking text from my mom, Susan. Please, Emma, can we talk? I'm so sorry. I had to make a decision. Do I embrace this new, joyful connection with Isabella, or do I try to salvage the broken pieces with the woman who raised me? I didn't reply to the text. I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I drove to my parents' house. It was late, but the lights were on. My dad opened the door before I could knock, his face etched with worry. She's in the living room, he said quietly, giving my shoulder a squeeze. My mom, Susan, was sitting on the couch, clutching a tissue. She looked small, defeated. The box of letters was on the coffee table between us, the lid off. It was no longer a secret. It was an accusation. I didn't sit down. I stood there, the weight of everything I'd learned and felt pressing down on me. I met her, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I met Isabella. My mom flinched, as if I'd struck her. A fresh wave of tears filled her eyes. I was so wrong, Emma. I see that now. I was just so terrified. From the moment we brought you home, you were my whole world, and every letter felt like a threat to that. It was selfish. It was cruel, and I have no excuse. I looked at this woman, the one who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up with me when I was sick, who loved me with a ferocity that was, I now understood, born from a deep-seated fear of loss. Her love was real, but it was also flawed, deeply, tragically flawed. I'm not going to disappear, Mom, I said, the title feeling both strange and familiar on my tongue. I'm still your daughter. Her head snapped up, a flicker of hope in her red-rimmed eyes. But what you did, I continued, the pain sharp in my chest. You didn't just lie to me. You lied to her. You let her suffer for 18 years thinking I didn't care. You stole my choice. You stole my right to know where I came from. That's not something I can just forget. The room was silent except for the quiet tick of the grandfather clock. I was standing at a crossroads. One path led to holding on to this anger, letting it define our relationship forever. The other path was far more difficult. It led to forgiveness. I found a brother and a mother who never stopped loving me. That doesn't mean I love you any less. It means my heart just got bigger. I took a step toward her. But we can't go back to the way things were. We can't pretend this didn't happen. We have to build something new. And that starts with the truth. All of it. Always. It wasn't a neat, happy ending. It was messy and painful and real. My relationship with my mom, Susan, would always bear the scars of her deception. But it wasn't broken beyond repair. And my relationship with Isabella was a tender, new beginning. A story that was just starting to be written. The moral of the story isn't that love conquers all. It's that love is complicated. It can be selfish and fearful, even when it's real. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to choose one love over another, but to find the courage to hold both and to demand the honesty that makes love truly worth having.